Hey everyone, and welcome to What Did I Miss?, where today I'll be breaking down the first episode of the new Star Trek series named Prodigy. This is now the 10th new series in the history of the Star Trek franchise to air, and the third that is animated, and will not be the last new series, as Star Trek Strange New Worlds is set to debut in 2022. What is different though about this series is that it is reported to be catered to a younger audience, which is one thing that may bring in new fans, but has many older fans of the franchise weary about the subject matter and tone. This was the main thing I was concerned with going into the first episode, and while I did notice certain things in the series that may be geared more towards kids, such as how the series deals with violence, I would not say this was any more juvenile than the recent What If animated series produced by Marvel. But before I get into it, if you could leave a like on the video, I would very much appreciate it. Doing so helps the video get out to more people, and if you really enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button as well for weekly sci-fi videos. All in all, I will say that I enjoyed the first episode, which is named Lost and Found. I wasn't blown away by it, but I do see a lot of promise, and I think there's a lot of really cool stuff the show can do. One thing that the other current animated Star Trek series Lower Decks is showing us is that being an animated series allows the show to do things that a live action show would not be able to do due to budgetary restraints or whatever. Just like recently, Cetacean Ops popped up on the show, and for those of you that don't know, this is a facility within a Federation starship that helps with navigation and is run by dolphins, which sounds both ridiculous and awesome, which is why it works so well on an animated series. It would not necessarily translate as well to live action. I think with Prodigy being in the Delta Quadrant, which I'm going to talk about further in a bit, plus the Protostar being now the most advanced ship we have seen on Star Trek, there's a lot of interesting things they can do. Speaking of when this series takes place, in case you don't know, the first episode takes place in the year 2383, which is 2 years after the second season of Lower Decks, which just finished airing, took place, and 5 years after the USS Voyager returned from the Delta Quadrant. At the beginning of the episode, we follow the character Dal as he tries to escape from Tars Lamora, a prison colony, but I don't think this is a prison in conventional terms. I think this is more likely an orphanage of stolen children from around the universe, as we see a young Caitian child later in the episode. This reminded me of the pilot episode of the series Voyager and the motivations behind the Caretaker entity, as it too grabbed groups of people from all around the galaxy and brought them to the Delta Quadrant. The substance that they are mining is referred to as chimerium, which is interesting because this substance has only showed up before in the pocket novels from the Next Generation era, which are not normally considered canon. But one of the main characters on Prodigy is Rok-Tahk, who is a Brakarian, another species that had only shown up before in the same era of novels. So obviously the creators of the show are looking for some inspiration from that material. This substance may have a connection to the character Gwen and her father, the villain of the series, who is named the Diviner. Chimerium is found on a planet which is inhabited by a race known as the Nalore. This species had midnight black skin, braided hair, and many other common features that Gwen and the Diviner have. So while he states that they are both Va'Nak and the last of their kind, this could be a religious designation, not their species. It is apparent that the Diviner is looking for the USS Protostar and is aware of the Federation, so he may either have gone searching in the Delta Quadrant for the ship, or a caretaker-like entity also took him from his planet in the Alpha Quadrant, and he is now doing the same thing and using the children he finds as slave labor. After we see Dal try and fail to escape Tars Lamora, we meet Gwen and Dreadnought, the second-in-command bad guy, as they meet with a Kazon. The Kazon, of course, were introduced in the first episode of Voyager, and were one of the main reoccurring villains early on, and even recruited a member of the Voyager, Seska, to their side. However, these villains were not well received by fans of the series, so they were in a sense just written out, as it was explained that as the Voyager traveled back to Earth, that they would be passing through different areas of space that were occupied by different species, like the Borg and the Kazon. So after a while, it was understood that the Voyager had traveled through Kazon space, which does make sense, but really it was just so they didn't have to bring back a villain that people didn't want to see. But seeing a Kazon on this episode may tell us where in the Delta Quadrant this is all taking place. Since the Kazon appeared when the Voyager was at their furthest from Earth, that could mean that Prodigy also takes place in this same area of space. The Kazon gives them a young Caitian, a feline species introduced in the original animated series and has been most recently seen on Lower Decks in the form of the ship's doctor, T'Ana. Besides the Caitian, there are quite a few other species that show up from the Alpha Quadrant, like Zero, who is a Medusan. They were a species first introduced on the original series, and the container that we see Zero in during a flashback looks very similar to the one seen used on the original series. Also, there's Jankum Pog, who is a Tellarite, another species introduced on the original series. On the series Voyager, the Kazon were trying to obtain the technology of the Caretaker that enabled it to grab people from all over the galaxy, so perhaps they were finally able to recreate it. Or perhaps another species has reconstructed the array that the Caretaker used and is doing the same thing. While the Caretaker died in its first appearance, it was alluded to that there may be others like it still alive. It is made obvious that while Gwen is not a prisoner like the others on the show, she is not happy about enslaving children and wants to leave the colony but is not able to. I got the feeling that the relationship between her and the Diviner may not be biological, and Gwen may only be close to him because they are the only two of their kind here. This would make it easier for her to turn on him this season once she decides to join the crew. She is definitely an interesting character, as she also has a talent for understanding different languages and is able to wield some type of energy weapon that can form into different shapes. If she and the Diviner are in fact Nalori, this was a race that had fought the Federation and lost in the past. So the Diviner may want to keep Gwen from knowing about the Federation until he can tell her a distorted version of the events so that she supports him fully. In the information release leading up to the first episode, series creator Kevin Hageman stated that the portrayal of the Diviner by John Noble is based on the performance of Ricardo Montalban as Khan. I think this kind of ties into the idea that the Diviner is a member of a race that was exiled by the Federation, and he has just been sitting on this rock waiting for his chance to strike back. If he was aware of the Protostar, it could be his version of the Genesis device that he can use against the Federation. If in fact the Protostar is the most advanced vessel in Starfleet, which since it is a brand new ship at the latest point in history of the Federation, it should be. This would be the best weapon to use against its makers. And of course, I'm not talking about Discovery and the ships that we have seen there, because that series now takes place like 800 years in the future from this point. The rest of the episode rounds up the main cast and gets a Protostar off the colony. I don't know if it is just me, but the second part of the episode really felt to me a lot more like Star Wars than it did Star Trek. Especially when Dreadnought pulled a General Grievous, and even when Gwen wears a hood and wields her energy sword, she looks like she's cosplaying a Jedi. The Diviner even looks like he could be a failed design choice for the Emperor. This will be the first Star Trek series that does not center around a Starfleet crew, and instead will follow these characters as they learn how to be Starfleet. This is an interesting concept for a new series in the franchise, but it does make this group similar to ones we have seen on other sci-fi series like Star Wars. Having just watched The Bad Batch, I can pick up a lot of similarities between these two series, so I hope that in future episodes, the show is able to distinguish itself a bit more. I think that including Janeway as a training hologram, who we only see briefly at the end of the episode, along with other remnants from established canon, will make the show feel more like a Star Trek show. Setting this series in the Delta Quadrant allows the show to bring back characters and ideas shown on Voyager, such as when Dal references the pulsar cluster named the Window of Dreams that was featured on Voyager, and also expand on them. Besides Kate Mulgrew returning, Robert Beltran will also be returning as now Captain Chakotay at some point, and Billy Campbell will also be reprising the voice of his infamous character, Thadian Okona, so we will be getting a lot of callbacks this season. But as I said, all in all, I thought it was a good first episode that made me want to keep watching. Let me know what you think. How do you like the first episode of Star Trek Prodigy? Thank you very much for clicking on this video. Please hit that like button if you have enjoyed it, and I will see you next time on What Did I Miss?